represent tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of folks, right? So people all around the country are coming and saying, what is People's Budget LA? They're looking at this data that David has led us in collecting. They're asking, how can we engage in similar processes? And you see movements growing. So we just want to underscore the audience reach of this campaign. And really, it's not an audience. It's a community reach, right? We want to be very clear. So we've talked about the number of folks who've taken the survey, but beyond the number of folks who've taken the survey are people around the globe engaging in the data. So this data was collected in 30 days. So when David talks about 24,000 people took the survey, that's in 30 days. I know some of you all are trying to collect your own data. You are not allowed, that's not normal for people to be engaging in this way. It's because they care about this issue. They see it as the issue of this generation. And so on our page, on our website, we have 195,000 unique visitors to the website. Website views in the last 30 days, it's only been up 30 days, 442,000 folks. Average visits per day, people are coming to our website at 11.4 thousand per day. It's global, and it's really important to think about that, especially as you think about how does that compare to what you all experience. We've actually driven people to your website because we encourage people to participate in city council meetings, in budget committee meetings. So the work that we're doing is also work of civic engagement, right? You all also know that People's Budget LA has been trending on social media ever since we've started using that hashtag. Just last week, we trended #1 for 3 hours in the entire country, not in Los Angeles, not in California, but the entire country. We trended #1. People care about this issue. So this is not about our social media reach as much as remembering that social media reach is also a reflection of what people care about, right? It's really important to also remember that people are searching for People's Budget LA at the same rates that they're searching for city council or the mayor, right? And we're actually driving people to do searches of you all, right? So here's the closing point. That this is the overwhelming demand of the people globally, of people nationally, and of Angelenos in particular. What we are demanding, what Angelenos are demanding, is that we be courageous in this moment. I heard so many of you, when George Floyd was killed way over in Minneapolis, speak his name. But have you spoken the names of Riddell Jones, or Eric Rivera, or Anthony Vargas, or the 609 people who've been killed by law enforcement in LA County just in the last 7 years? Have you been willing to lift up the name of 14-year-old Jesse Romero, who should have been greeted by somebody who was a community worker and asked, if he had a marker, why are you tagging, right? Not shot while he had his hands up as a 14-year-old boy who hadn't even made it to high school yet. We need to think about, and sometimes I was gonna apologize for becoming emotional, but I'm not, because I'm a mother, and you're a mother, and we all have children that we are trying to make this world better for. We're all connected to each other. We have an opportunity in this moment. You have an opportunity to be courageous, to not think about the political calculations and what will the LA Police Protective League do if I say I'm cutting their budget. This should not be about your own political ambitions. This should be about what kind of world do you want to make. The world is speaking right now. They're saying we don't want a system of policing that puts targets on the backs of black people especially, but also is a regular assailant and traumatizer of our entire community. You have an opportunity now To not just say, who am I as a city council member, but whose are you? Do you belong to the Police Protective League? Do you belong to your ambitions? Do you belong to your ego, or do you belong to the people? We're challenging you to say you belong to the people, to do something courageous. And we see examples all around this country of people doing things that are courageous. In Minneapolis, in Denver, up in Oakland, in San Francisco, you're seeing policymakers say, you know what, we're not just going to cut $100 million or $150 million, which amounts to the proposed increase, right? They're saying, you know what, we want to end our relationship with policing. Los Angeles Housing Services is talking about severing ties with the police department, right? You have an opportunity right now to say we're going to do things that are courageous. In Minneapolis, they are disbanding Minneapolis Police Department. And we want to be very clear that as you take courageous steps, that you stay grounded with community. And remember that community is saying we want public safety, but as Kendrick said, we can reimagine it. And I'm going to be quiet after I tell a quick story. When I first moved to Los Angeles a little more than 20 years ago, I went to graduate school at USC. That's what brought me here. I came here when I was 21. And the second place that I lived was in Leimert Park. And I lived in this unit on Degnan, close to Audubon Middle School. And something strange would happen every morning at about 7 o'clock. All the old folks would go out and sit on their porches. And I watched this happen for about a month, and I was friends with the people who lived in my building. And I asked Miss Gordon, who lived in the building, in the unit in front of me, because she was one of the older folks who sat on the porch. She'd come out in her house coat with her coffee mug, and they'd sit out there, and sometimes they'd talk back and forth to each other. And I said, Miss Gordon, why do y'all come outside every morning? And she said, oh, we're watching the babies go to school. And they would sit outside and watch the babies go to Audubon. And there were never any fights. Sometimes they would pull some kids and go, stop cussing, I'm going to tell your mama, right? But that was public safety. It was beautiful. It was the building of community, right? It was the way that I knew that I didn't have to worry about being a young single woman living in a unit that was pretty accessible. Somebody could have easily gotten into my door, but Miss Gordon was looking out for me, you know? And so it's really important that we understand that as we're saying, and we are saying, defund the police, we're also saying reimagine public safety. And so we're asking you to step into your highest selves in this critical moment. This is a moment when the whole world has cracked open. Don't be weak. Don't say this is what is. Imagine what can be. And so we're asking you to do that because we're also making ourselves do that. This is Hollywood Boulevard last Sunday. There were over 100,000 people out on Hollywood Boulevard. There are tens of thousands of people every single Wednesday right down the street from where you are. You're welcome to join us, right? Last night on an organizing meeting, not a protest, we had to turn people away. We had over 700 people fill a church for a Black Lives Matter organizing, just a general meeting to talk about what it means to defund the police. Every day there are people filling the streets and putting their bodies on the line, but also saying, you know what, I'm going to reject respectability politics. I'm going to step into my highest self. I'm going to look at my children, but also hear the voices of those who walked before me, and I'm going to be courageous. That's what we're asking you to do, to be courageous, defund the police, and reimagine public safety. You have the ability to do it. Let's let Los Angeles lead this charge. So that's it for our presentation, but we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I don't think the people's budget is very complicated. I think for those of us who grew up in these neighborhoods, who know what this looks like firsthand, who have actual lived experiences in some of our neighborhoods, and why we got into these careers, honestly, as up and coming organizers when we were kids, fighting back certain systems, pushing back on what we thought was unfair and racist growing up, and still dealing with so much of that in our respective districts, which is where I call home, where I choose to raise my family. So I know why I got into this, into politics, to try to change it from inside. And so when you talk about, being a mom, yeah. I'm here because I am a mom. And I'm here because I've been trying to reimagine Los Angeles in my neighborhood for 47 years. And so it's not complicated. This is not that difficult to do. I think the challenges for some of us is trying to work with other entities to do their fair share as well. I'm very, very concerned about the LAHSA numbers that were just released last week, where our homeless population continues to grow, disproportionately people of color living on the streets. And I grow more and more concerned with the fact that the city of Los Angeles has a duty to build shelter, but the services are what's missing. It's like, how do we reimagine Los Angeles, but how do we reimagine LA County and working with our partners whose duty is to provide those services for our unsheltered communities? What does that look like? Do we have to get sued continuously for us to be able to show up with actual dollars to pay for those services? Apparently so, because we're in the middle of another lawsuit. And 17 years of lawsuit has only led to 60,000 people living on the streets. That doesn't help. I think all of us are challenged with the fact that there is certain things we can do. It's not an excuse, but everyone needs to do their fair share and make sure that they show up, not only for Angelenos, but for people who live in the county of LA. So for me, I am committed to continuing to reimagine what my neighborhoods look like, what I want from my kid when she becomes a mom. And when I took the responsibilities of leading this council, I led with the first thing that is the most comfort for me growing up, and that's family. And for me, reimagining Los Angeles is putting families first. What does it look like for a single mom who's in a motel that we can't seem to find permanent supporting housing for her and her children? What does it look like for that mom every 30 days to have to move to a different motel and her child needs to move to a different school? What does that look like for a child who's been moving from motel to motel because we can't seem to figure out how to permanently house her and her children? Motels are not conducive to raising kids, especially if they're plagued with human trafficking issues and drug issues and other stuff going on in the neighborhood. So to me, reimagining Los Angeles starts with families and with children. And we need to make sure that our budget reflects that. So as a one vote on the city council, I'm very much committed to figuring out what that looks like, because what currently is not working. And you're absolutely right, Kendrick. I think the trauma, the mistrust needs to be dealt with. So I just want to thank you for being here. I hope this was helpful. It certainly was helpful for me. I don't want to take up too much time because I know Mr. Krikorian wants to say a few words as well. But it's not complicated. It's not rocket science. This is exactly how you reimagine neighborhoods. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam President, and thank you all very much for, I think, a very positive presentation that talks about a lot of areas that many of us who are sitting here with you today are already pretty passionate about, and maybe we need to even be more creative, as you mentioned, Kendrick, maybe rethinking some of the assumptions that we have always fallen back on, because when it comes to, for example, economic development, especially in underserved communities, this is one of the areas that Mr. Price and I have spent a considerable amount of our time and energy focusing on, but clearly there haven't been enough resources devoted to that, and we need to do better. We need to do more. When it comes to things that uplift families, like child care and early childhood development and some of those sorts of things. These are areas that Ms. Martinez and I have focused a considerable amount of our time and energy on. Clearly, much, much more needs to be done. When it comes to housing our homelessness, obviously it's the crisis of a lifetime, of a generation, and it's something that everybody in the world sees. Mr. O'Farrell has devoted virtually, every waking hour to trying to address that, and all of us have as well. But he's led this effort to try to go to other agencies of government, like our state government and our federal government, to try to wake them up as well, because we have our areas of jurisdiction and our areas of resources that are available, but it's a small slice of the larger pie. And I think one of the things that I'm excited about seeing over the last few weeks of national organizing that you all and others have led is that this is a time of, it's an inflection point for Los Angeles, to be sure. I think it's a national time of reconsideration of priorities and reconsideration of where we need to invest. And we need the support, as Ms. Martinez said, on mental health. We need our county friends to stand up and support this, because this is maybe for me, the single biggest piece of social services that is absolutely missing, that touches on every single thing you talked about, whether it's police community interactions, whether it's education, health care, housing issues, and homelessness. All of that has been driven in the wrong direction for the last 40 years because of our country's failure to invest in mental health care, failure to take it seriously, to provide mental health care as something that will lift us all up. We need, as a country, to do one heck of a lot more there. There's many of other issues that we've talked about today that I want to tell you I'm eager to work with you on, not just over the next couple of weeks while we're responding to the mayor's budget, but on an ongoing basis. And that's why I think it's so important that we had some of our policy experts here as well, because, and there will be more, I think. There will be more opportunity to interact with other policy area chairs. We need this to be a discussion not just about this budget, but the reimagining part that you talked about, which goes beyond just the dollars and cents to not only how much are we going to spend, but how are we going to spend it? Where is it going to be invested? And we just haven't done as good a job as we need to have done, especially in that area of investing. And I think many, as I say, this is a first opportunity, and I'm so sorry that I'm looking at the clock because we have budget and finance to start shortly, but I want this to be a first conversation, not the one and only conversation that we're going to have, not just over the course of the next few weeks, but an ongoing basis with all of us. I don't see how we can take advantage of this moment in history if we don't do exactly that. So I want to thank you for taking the time to come down and share this with us, and look forward to the continuing conversation.
And one of the things is that because we have been here before, this country has been here before. It was here when Emmett Till died. It was here then. And so now we are here at this moment, and you have shared your positions, and they line up. The question now becomes, what will you do? And I appreciate your sentiment. I do. I really do. And one of the advantages I have, I'm usually the oldest person in the room. and today I am. And I'm going to use that privilege to ask you all to make a commitment, not to words, because you're good at that, to make a commitment to action. I'm going to ask you to invest in, first, the reimagining, starting with reimagining a society that doesn't focus on the culture of fear and punishment. Mm-hmm. Start there. And the budget reflects that. The budget reflects that. And so we appreciate your words. I'm looking for a word that says, yes, brother, I'm going to do this. Yes, we're going to do this. I appreciate your sentiment, but what I'm looking for is a commitment. One of the things that I have decided at this stage at 72 is that I don't want to necessarily be in conversation for conversation's sake. I'd like to negotiate with y'all. I'd like to put some things on the table and let's go back and forth. Let's resolve this. If you believe this, let's resolve this. If you're committed to this, let's resolve this. If you think what you just said and heard here is meaningful, then let's resolve this. Let's move forward with a commitment. And so I'm asking you now, as the president, the former president, a commitment to reimagining and to defunding the police.
Well, let me just say this first. Even though, Akila, you got me tingling inside, but you do that with some regularity. This presentation was unbelievably good. It was smooth. It was to the point. It was tight. And I'm very proud. Now, we all know that every layer of government has to play a role. But like I tell these guys all the time, and they're probably sick of hearing it, but I do want to say it to you. I believe that the winds in this country blow from the west to the east. And I do believe that everybody looks to us. So my pledge to you is to try to help LA do its part. I want people in other cities to look at us and see that we are creatively reimagining and doing things. So I'm excited about the future. I'm always available to go back and forth with various ideas. And just in the presentation today, I have several that I'll be chatting with leadership about. And I think that will be a good step in the right direction. But I won't personally, I'm not going to miss this moment. You know, the world is looking at us, and I do want to not be part of history. I want to make it. And you only have opportunities to do that a few times. I believe in this council. I believe in its leadership. I believe we will do some things that will make you proud. So let's rock them and sock them. I'm ready.
So will you commit?
I just did.
That's one commitment. All of you are committing, I take it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Curry, Mr. Price.
Yeah, Mr. Curran.
Yes, you can just call me Curran. As I said, I was excited when you came. I'm even more excited, even more hopeful now. Yes, Keely, as the second oldest man in this room, I accept that challenge. I accept that challenge to make sure we're doing all we can to reimagine what we're doing and to reimagine the output. Like you say, we've heard the talk, you know, from the student demonstrations in the 60s to the anti-war to the 65 uprising, it's 92. Right, we've heard I mentioned in council a couple weeks ago, we've had these teachable moments before, but now it's the time to action. And so I'm excited about the presentation that was laid out. You know, a little disappointed that more of my constituents did not participate. We had a low number, some 300. But I know that their thoughts and their feelings are certainly consistent with the findings that were made throughout our city. People want change. and they want to see it now, and they want to be able to make sure their families can see it. The community I represent, is about a third under the age of 18. So I'm always focusing on education, parks, open space, opportunities for our young folks, because they are laying the foundation. As chair of economic development, sensitive to jobs, certainly for our youth, training, internships during the summer, and I hope we'll be able to expand that in ways we have never done before, but also working with our adults and making sure we're doing the kinds of placements that are important, not just for those who are unemployed because they got training, they can't find a job, but those who need to be trained, those who are formerly incarcerated, those veterans, a whole range. We've got to find ways to bring them into the system directly and indirectly. And so I'm excited about being able to work in a collaborative way to do that. This is an exciting time, as all my colleagues have suggested. And we realize that this is a point in history that we have a chance to not just say the right things, but do the right things and do it in ways that we haven't before. So I'm excited. I did have just one quick question, though, Lynn, I think you mentioned it early on, about the notion of participatory budgetary process. Talk to us a little bit about where that's been effective in some other cities and how we can learn from those experiences.
Sure. So the best example I would give is what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi under Mayor Chokwe Lumumba. So every year, he's only been in office 2 years, but every year he's convened a People's Assembly. They talk about the budget. They engage in a day-long or in sometimes multi-day process where they talk about where they want those dollars to go. That could be something that you all could do. There's lots of literature on participatory budgeting. I'm happy to talk with you about it. We engaged in an online participatory budgeting process that helped with this data. And so this is something that you all can easily do. And get the input of the people. I think it's important that when you do participatory budgeting, though, that you don't just listen, it's not just an exercise, right? That the people who are investing their time and energy feel like that actually is manifested in your budget priorities. So we want to be very clear that the people who engaged with us you're going to be tapped and asked, oh, well, we can reform the police, or maybe the police who are taking temperatures don't have to wear a gun. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about transforming public safety, reimagining and implementing that reimagined public safety. So it's important as you engage with your constituents that that actually translates into policy and into the budget itself.
Well, I think we're getting the message loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Just stay informed. And Herb and I thought of putting together the COVID ad hoc committee that we currently sit on, and that is to reimagine how that care money is going to be reinvested in communities of color. That's just the way we put it together. We talk about it because it's our communities who are being impacted disproportionately to any other community. So there is a commitment there. There's our motion that's going to be heard in Budget Committee in a couple of hours, in about an hour and a half. So I know we need to get going. And there's also about $100 million in that COVID-19 care money to help people pay their rent. It's that simple. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out that people are going to need actual cash to be able to make their rent during the pandemic. So there is actual things that we're doing, that we're committed to doing, but we're going to continue to push for more and do better. But there's stuff on the table currently going through the process to make sure that we are doing things differently. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank this panel for not just the work you've done and the research you've done and the great care that you have through your lived experience and how that's communicated to us today in person. Very, very powerful. I want to thank you for opening up a space for us as well. That has served a great purpose for me personally and professionally in this moment. I do my best to make decisions based on appreciating and understanding a perspective. And I'm reflecting as I'm hearing everyone speak today on a piece of perspective that has been part of my life, but really began to be more useful than ever. And that was back in 2015. I'm of Native American heritage on my mother's side. In fact, my grandfather was chief of my tribe. And I knew that we had a stain on our city administrative code, and that was that we officially celebrated Columbus Day in the city of Los Angeles. I took serious issue with that. And through the wise counsel of then Council President Herb Wesson, we had lots of conversations early on about how I could work to eliminate that because of all that went into that incredible offensive symbol and yearly celebration, not just in the city of Los Angeles, but across the country. And through that 2-year process, we elevated the fact that genocide occurred in our own country, that once Native Americans had been reduced in incredible numbers, even as early as the 1600s, and the struggles that happened across the entire Western Hemisphere, how that helped lead into the African slave trade, and how this country was built on forced labor, slavery, and genocide. And I think that we're still living with the systems that were established in those times. And I've talked about that over the years, and that is very, very present in my approach to policy. And I think we have an opportunity to go beyond dismantling the institutional structures that oppress. We know that there is a warrior mentality in police departments across the United States. That reality didn't come out of nowhere. There's a reason for that, and we all know that. So we have a lot of work to do, and we do need our partners. Clearly, you're holding our feet to the fire, as you should, and you will continue doing that, and I expect nothing less. But we also need to remember, in terms of education, in terms of the healthcare system, and in terms of jurisdictional responsibilities, it's important to note that the county budget of $35.5 billion is scheduled traditionally to be adopted by the end of June, with a final budget adoption by the end of September. They're our partners in this effort as well. They're our partners in reimagining what public safety looks like. They are our partners in imagining what it looks like to deliver these resources to our neighborhoods that have been traditionally marginalized and overlooked. Lastly, I'll say this. Back in September, this council, through my efforts, hosted a summit on poverty. That generated a report that I will now share with all of you. It was heard in council and adopted in council back in March. Then COVID happened. We will hear follow-up instructions from that report from experts in the field who have the lived experience on policy and funding ideas for how to invest in our neighborhoods that have literally never had it. So I think the dismantling, the reimagining has begun, but every one of you are absolutely right. What is it that we're going to do now? And I encourage everyone listening to be part of that conversation. Again, thank you for this moment, because we're in this constructive phase of how can we take a good, clear look at what reimagining, what public safety, what law enforcement, what all these institutions will look like as we put the building blocks of change in place and apply the funding accordingly. Thank you.
Because I know we're out of time. One, we want to encourage you to remember that you have power in the city. And so we know that there's the county budget, but there's also the city budget. So we've been encouraging people to think about, where do you have power, even in your own households, right? So we have, in my household, we have completely abolition of police in my household completely. We have a different public safety plan, right? If you work in a neighborhood How can you push police out of your neighborhoods? Kendrick is doing work in Hollywood and holding on to power there and saying, how can we move police off of sets, right? And so it's important to think about, as our city council, we know there's a county budget, but there's also a city budget. So please don't just look and say, well, let's get the county to do something. What can the city do right now? We also want to lift up that you said you're happy we're holding your feet to the fire. This is tiring for us too. We don't want to have to constantly hold your feet to the fire. What we would love is for you to step out, be bold, be courageous, and we want to fight alongside you against the undue influence of the Protective League, against those who say that we can't do this, and for an implemented, reimagined public safety. So just as much as we will, call you out on social media or sometimes show up, we also want to make sure that you know that if you're courageous, there are millions of people who will stand alongside you, celebrate with you, and fight with you. Fight with you.
Thank you.
And just one more thing. Okay, so y'all know it is Hollywood. Y'all see these headlines made all the time of movies that got greenlit and, movies that are being made and in development and such. And then you don't see headlines about them ever again. But every once in a while you get one that shakes up the world, where everybody is paying attention, right? City councils all over the country are making those headlines, and those headlines are going to be framed and kept forever. I want y'all to imagine what your headline is going to be. What headline do y'all want framed? Y'all can shake up the world by the decisions that you make. What statement are y'all going to make that is going to make headlines that shakes things up? Because to be honest, what we say in the movement all the time, the movement moves without you. This movement is going to move whether you like it or not. What side of history are y'all going to be on? What headline is going to be framed and reposted and celebrated for history, throughout history, that started right here in Los Angeles? Just imagine the first thing that y'all can imagine, and I'm talking about implementable strategies, something that is actionable, that is going to happen, that is a commitment. What is that headline? What is that headline that y'all are going to make? And I know y'all can do it, and when y'all do that, y'all help us. That is what helps the movement move. That's what builds momentum and encourages us and helps us heal from being traumatized. What are y'all gonna do to help us heal after we've been out there and been, beat up by these folks, by the police, for exercising our right and trying to fight for our communities? What headlines are y'all gonna make? I can't wait to see it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.